The boss challenges the 13-year-old black daughter of the technician to fix an impossible engine, and what she reveals shocks everyone. "What kind of joke is this? A kid in my shop during an official inspection?" Mr. Wilson's sharp voice echoed through Prime Auto Works like a whip crack, halting every mechanic's work instantly. Zoe Carter, 13 years old, crouched beside a 2019 Ford engine, her small hands still gripping a wrench. Her heart pounded, the weight of Wilson's scorn igniting a fire she'd kept buried under years of dismissive glances. She'd arrived from school just 30 minutes ago, as she did every day to help her father James, who'd led the mechanic team for 15 years. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wilson," James rushed to say, stepping toward his daughter. "Zoe, go home. It's not the time." But Wilson raised a hand, cutting him off. The 55-year-old businessman, owner of one of the city's largest auto shop chains, was there for a surprise inspection that could shut down Prime Auto Works. His pristine suit and Italian shoes clashed starkly with the grease and tool environment. "Hold on, James. Let the kids stay." A malicious smile spread across Wilson's face. "In fact, I've got a better idea." Zoe stood slowly. Her eyes met those of the man every employee feared. At 13, she'd learned to recognize that look, the same one she saw on some teachers, store security guards, even neighbors. It was the look of someone who'd already decided what she was capable of, based solely on her skin color and age. The sting of his prejudice was a familiar wound, one she'd carried since she first dared to dream beyond their expectations. "You know what, James? Your little girl seems pretty confident handling that engine." Wilson walked to a covered area at the back of the shop, where a Mercedes S-Class had arrived 2 days ago. "This is a special case. My best mechanics from other branches have already tried. The engine just won't start. We haven't even managed a diagnosis." The laugh from Wilson's throat was calculatedly cruel. "How about we give the expert a shot? If she can at least figure out what's wrong, I'll consider keeping this place open." A deathly silence fell over the shop. The 8 mechanics exchanged uneasy glances. Everyone knew that Mercedes was a complete mystery. Even Tony, the veteran with 30 years of experience, hadn't pinpointed the issue. "Mr. Wilson, she's just a kid," James tried, his voice shaky. "Exactly." Wilson crossed his arms, clearly amused. "A kid who, I'm told, spends all day tinkering with cars. She must know as much as you lot, right?" Zoe stood still for a moment. Inside, a familiar part of her was waking up. The same feeling she got when solving math problems her classmates found impossible, or fixing broken electronics neighbors threw out. For the past year, she'd noticed small details the mechanics sometimes missed. Faint noises, electrical patterns, connections that didn't add up. Her dad thought it was just childish curiosity, but Zoe knew it was more. Wilson's challenge was a gauntlet thrown, and she was ready to pick it up with a resolve forged in countless moments of being underestimated. "Okay," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I'll do it." Wilson burst into laughter, turning to the other men. "Hear that? The kid's in." He clapped slowly, like he was applauding a circus act. "But let's make it interesting. If she pulls it off, I won't just keep the shop open. I'll give the whole team a bonus. If she fails," he paused dramatically, "well, I think you know what happens." As everyone watched in silence, Zoe approached the Mercedes. Her small hands gently touched the hood, and for a brief moment, something shifted in her expression. It wasn't the face of a nervous kid anymore, but the focused look of someone who might just know exactly how to crack this puzzle. Wilson had no clue that for the past 6 months, Zoe had been secretly studying the most advanced technical manual she found hidden in her dad's office. He didn't even suspect she'd developed a theory about that specific Mercedes the day it arrived at the shop. There, under all those skeptical stares and Wilson's smug grin, Zoe held a calm that only comes from knowing exactly where to find answers others seek in the wrong places. Her quiet confidence was a weapon, honed in the shadows of their doubt. If this story of courage and grit is hitting you hard, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a single miscalculation became the biggest mistake Wilson ever made in his career. Zoe walked slowly around the Mercedes, her eyes scanning every detail of the exposed engine. Wilson crossed his arms, clearly enjoying the show he'd set up. "Gonna take long, princess?" Some of us have real work to do." His mocking tone was a deliberate jab, meant to shake her, but it only sharpened her focus. The mechanics formed a semicircle, some with pitying looks, others with genuine curiosity. Tony Martinelli, the team veteran, whispered to James, "Man, this ain't right. She's just a kid." "I know," James replied through gritted teeth, "but if I step in now, he'll shut the shop down on the spot." Zoe completely ignored the comments around her. Her small hands glided gently over different engine components, pausing occasionally at specific points. To a casual observer, it looked like she was just pretending to understand. But Tony noticed something different. The kid wasn't touching randomly. She was following a logical sequence. First the ignition system, then the fuel system, then the electricals. It was exactly the order an experienced mechanic would use. "Interesting," Zoe murmured, more to herself than anyone else. Wilson laughed loudly. "What? You figure it out already? Don't worry, no one's going to blame you for giving up." But Zoe didn't give up. Instead, she crouched down and pointed to a small black box tied to the onboard computer. "This module here, have you checked if it's sending the right codes to the central system?" An awkward silence settled over the group. Tony frowned. None of them had thought to specifically check that component. It was a relatively new part most veteran mechanics weren't fully familiar with. "Of course we checked it," Wilson lied blatantly. "We checked everything. The problem is this car needs a level of expertise you lot clearly don't have." Zoe nodded calmly. "Makes sense, it's just... I read about those modules a few months ago." She stopped abruptly as if she'd said something she shouldn't have. "Where'd you read that?" Tony asked, genuinely curious. Zoe glanced at her dad, who looked equally surprised. "In the technical manuals in the office. When you're not looking, Dad, I sometimes borrow them to study." James blinked several times. "Zoe, those manuals are for certified mechanics." "Some are in technical English." "I know," she replied simply. "That's why I use my phone's translator for the tricky parts. And there's these YouTube videos that explain it really well." Wilson let out a sarcastic laugh. "Perfect. The kid thinks YouTube University's enough to fix a Mercedes worth $250,000, 0 cents. His derision was a challenge, one Zoe met with a steely determination that belied her age. He turned to the other men. "You hearing this? She wants to solve a problem specialized engineers couldn't crack with YouTube videos." But Zoe didn't waver. Instead, she kept examining the engine with a precision that was starting to unnerve even Wilson. "This model's direct injection system has a quirk," she said, her voice growing more confident. "If the control module doesn't recognize the right digital signature, it locks out the entire ignition as a security measure." Tony stepped closer. "Digital signature? What's that?" "It's like an electronic password," Zoe explained, now clearly in familiar territory. "Every part has a unique code. If the computer detects a part's been swapped without authorization, it refuses to work. It's to prevent car theft." One of the younger mechanics, Jake, cleared his throat. I never heard of that." "That's because it's pretty new tech," Zoe said, pointing to different connections. "Most technical courses haven't updated their curriculum yet, but the newer manuals cover it all." Wilson sensed he was losing control of the situation. His expression shifted from amused to irritated. "Enough stalling. If you're so smart, prove it. Fix the damn car or admit you're just a cocky kid who read a few pages online." The tension in the air was thick. Zoe took a deep breath and looked straight at Wilson. "All right, but I'll need a few minutes alone with the car and a laptop with internet access to download the reprogramming software." "Reprogramming what?" James asked, increasingly stunned by his daughter's knowledge. "To reset the digital signatures," Zoe replied, like it was the most obvious thing. "It's not hard, you just gotta know where to look." Wilson crossed his arms, his face red with irritation. "I'm not letting some brat mess with the electronics of a car worth more than this whole shop." That's when Tony stepped forward. "Let her try, Wilson. If she messes it up, you were gonna scrap the car anyway, right? And if she nails it," he paused meaningfully, "well, then you've got a working Mercedes for free." Zoe looked at Tony with gratitude. He'd just given her the exact chance she needed. For the past 6 months, While everyone thought she was just messing around in the shop, Zoe had been secretly unraveling the most complex patterns in modern automotive electronics. She knew exactly what was wrong with that Mercedes. She'd spotted the issue the first day it arrived, but hadn't dared speak up. Now, with her dad's shop on the line and all eyes on her, she had no choice. The stakes were higher than ever, her father's livelihood hanging on her ability to outsmart Wilson's cruel game. As Wilson grumbled his reluctant approval, Zoe mentally prepared to reveal knowledge that would leave everyone speechless. What none of them knew was that in recent weeks, she'd quietly accessed the shop's diagnostic system to study similar cases. The little girl everyone underestimated was about to prove she'd mastered things that took some engineers years to learn. And Wilson, who'd bet his reputation on her failure, was about to learn he'd gravely underestimated the wrong person. 15 minutes, Zoe said calmly, hooking up her personal laptop to the Mercedes diagnostic system. That's all I need. Wilson laughed nervously, but it sounded forced. Something about the kid's absolute confidence was starting to rattle him. 15 minutes to solve what specialized engineers couldn't in 2 days? You're delusional, girl. His taunt was a desperate attempt to regain control, but Zoe's unwavering focus turned it into fuel for her mission. But Zoe was already locked onto the screen. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with a precision that made Tony blink in surprise. These weren't the hesitant moves of a kid playing around. They were the confident commands of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. "Dad," she said, eyes still on the screen. "Remember when I told you I was studying those technical manuals?" James nodded, still processing everything. "I wasn't just studying, I was hacking." A chilling silence swept the shop. Wilson stepped forward, his face starting to flush. "What did you say?" Zoe kept typing, unfazed. 6 months ago I hacked the Mercedes diagnostic system. Not to steal anything," she added quickly, noticing the shocked looks around her, "but because I wanted to understand why so many cars were coming in with the same problem you guys couldn't fix." Wilson was visibly nervous now. That's impossible. A kid can't hack Mercedes security systems." "You're right," Zoe nodded, finally looking at him. "A normal kid couldn't, but I figured out I'm not a normal kid when I started seeing patterns nobody else did." On her laptop screen, codes began popping up in sequences that looked random to everyone but Zoe. "This Mercedes has the same issue as 17 other identical cars that hit Wilson's associated shops in the past 6 months. Want to know why?" The question hung like a threat. Wilson tried to keep his composure, but his hands trembled slightly. "I have no idea what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything," Zoe cut him off, her voice carrying an authority that silenced even the adults. "I'm proving it." She turned the laptop screen for everyone to see. A list of dozens of serial numbers appeared, each with dates and locations. All these cars were deliberately sabotaged on the assembly line. The control module was programmed to fail exactly 90 days after the first start. Tony leaned toward the screen, his eyes scanning the data. "My God, this is real. Completely real," Zoe confirmed. "And here's the kicker." She clicked another tab, revealing internal contracts and documents. All these faulty cars were later bought back by Mercedes for a fraction of their market value, easily fixed by removing one line of code, and resold as refurbished models with 400% profit margins. Wilson was visibly sweating now. "Where'd you get those documents?" That's confidential information." Zoe smiled. "For the first time since it all started. From the same source that told me you, Mr. Wilson, get a 20% commission for every faulty car your shop network can't fix." The revelation was a thunderbolt, exposing Wilson's greed and shattering his facade of authority. The silence that followed was deafening. Wilson opened and closed his mouth, floundering like a fish out of water. You can't prove that." "Oh, I can," Zoe said, opening another window on her laptop, "because I also hacked your corporate email account." The screen showed hundreds of emails between Wilson and Mercedes execs, detailing the exact scheme Zoe had described. Specific instructions on which cars to leave unsolved, lists of participating shops, and bank transfers with the precise commission amounts. James stepped closer, reading the emails over his daughter's shoulder. His expression shifted from shock to pure outrage. "Wilson, you knew. This whole time you knew how to fix those cars." "He didn't just know," Zoe continued. "He actively told mechanics not to look for real solutions. Look here," she pointed to a specific email. "Direct instruction. Keep the team focused on traditional diagnostics. Don't mention reprogramming software. Declare it unsolvable after 48 hours. Jake, the youngest mechanic, stepped forward, anger rising in his voice. "You made us look incompetent on purpose. How many nights did we stay late trying to crack problems you knew were impossible to solve the way you told us?" Wilson tried one last desperate play. "She's a hacker, a criminal. You gonna believe a kid who broke into systems illegally?" "Maybe," Zoe said calmly, "but you'll have to believe them too." She clicked one last time, and the screen showed a live Facebook stream from the shop's page. There were 847 real-time viewers, the number climbing fast. The entire conversation, the whole reveal, Wilson's accidental confession, it was all streaming live. "I started the stream when I began hacking the system," Zoe explained, watching Wilson go completely pale. "I figured people deserved to know the truth about why their cars never got fixed." Tony let out a low whistle. "Zoe, you recorded everything. Every word he said." Comments on the live stream flooded the screen like an avalanche. "That's Wilson from Prime Auto Works. This jerk charged me $4,000, 0 cents, saying my car was unfixable. My sister lost her job because her car broke down and she couldn't get to work. This guy knew how to fix it. Someone call the FBI. It's a nationwide scam." Wilson stared at the screen, the furious faces around him, and finally at Zoe, who watched him with an expression blending pity and iron resolve. "Why?" he asked, his voice a defeated whisper. Zoe ended the stream and closed her laptop. When she spoke, her voice carried a wisdom that seemed impossible for her 13 years. "Because you bet that a black girl from the suburbs would never be smart enough to figure out your scheme, and because every time you looked at me you only saw what you expected, a nobody too inferior to be a threat." Her words were a mirror, forcing Wilson to confront the prejudice that had blinded him to her genius. She paused, locking eyes with Wilson. "Truth is, I've been tracking this pattern for months, waiting for the right moment to expose it all. You gave me that moment the second you decided to humiliate me in public." Outside, the sound of sirens started closing in. Someone had clearly called the authorities during the live stream. Wilson glanced at the door, then back at Zoe, realizing at last that he'd underestimated not just a kid, but a mind that had outplayed him in every way. As the sirens grew louder and Wilson grasped that his career had just been obliterated by a girl he thought was beneath him, Zoe stayed calm, knowing she'd taken the first step to change not just her own life, but the lives of everyone deceived by the same corrupt system. What none of them knew yet was that the live stream hadn't just exposed a local fraud scheme, it had caught the attention of much bigger players about to offer Zuliop impunities that would forever redefine what it means to be underestimated. 2 months later, Zoe sat in a conference room in downtown Chicago, surrounded by execs from Tesla, Google, and Microsoft. Her presentation on automotive fraud detection systems had just earned a standing ovation from 200 engineers and investors. "Congratulations, Zoe," said Jennifer Walsh, Tesla's VP. "Your real-time detection system could revolutionize the industry. We're talking a $3 million 0 cents consulting contract to start." The offer was a triumph, a stark contrast to the humiliation Wilson had tried to inflict. The girl who 2 months ago was just the technician's daughter was now being courted by the world's top tech firms. Her livestream had gone viral, racking up over 15 million views and grabbing national media attention. Zoe smiled, but quickly turned her thoughts back home. "Thank you for the opportunity, but I need to discuss it with my family first. And there's one condition." The execs exchanged curious glances. "I want part of the project developed at my dad's shop, with his team. Tony, Jake, and the others deserve to be part of this story." Crosstown, Wilson was clearing out his one-bedroom apartment. After the scandal, he'd not only lost his job, but faced a federal fraud lawsuit that landed him 18 months of house arrest and a $150,000 0-cents fine. His wife had filed for divorce, taking half of what little he had left. The 47 shops he managed were sold off to cover customer compensation. Now he scraped by on a small pension and odd jobs as an automotive consultant for tiny shops. Ironically, the kind of places he used to sneer at. "I can't believe a kid took me down," he muttered, watching a TV report about Zoe receiving a National Young Innovator Award. Meanwhile, at Prime Auto Works, now rebranded as Carter & Crew Automotive Tech, James watched his daughter explain engineering concepts to a team of reporters with pride. The shop had become a training and development hub where local kids learned cutting-edge automotive tech. "Dad," Zoe said, stepping away from the cameras for a moment, "remember when you told me to study more and mess with cars less?" James laughed, his eyes shining with proud tears. "Looks like you were right all along." Tony approached, holding a tablet with the new diagnostic system Zoe had built. "You know, Zoe, we spent 30 years in this game thinking we knew everything about cars. You showed us we've still got a lot to learn." "It wasn't about knowing more," Zoe replied. "It was about looking with different eyes. You knew the right stuff, you just didn't know other people were keeping you from finding the answers." Jake, now promoted to supervisor of the new electronic diagnostics division, nodded in awe. "A 13-year-old girl taught us more about justice than any adult we know." 6 months after the scandal, Zoe's system was rolled out in over 2,000 shops nationwide, helping identify and fix similar cases of corporate sabotage. She'd founded a nonprofit called Clear Codes, offering free automotive tech training to kids from underserved communities. During a talk at a local school, a 14-year-old boy raised his hand. "Zoe, how'd you dare take on that guy? He was way more powerful than you." Zoe smiled, recalling how she felt that day in the shop. "You know, he was more powerful at first. He had money, influence, and control over my dad's job, but he made a mistake." "What?" "He confused power with smarts, and my age and skin color with incompetence." When you underestimate someone based on bias, you're handing them the biggest advantage, the element of surprise. Her courage was a beacon, inspiring others to confront the biases that sought to limit them. The teen audience listened intently as Zoe went on. "Wilson thought he knew my limits before he even met me. That made him lazy, arrogant, and careless. He never imagined I could be a threat, so he never protected himself from me." A girl in the back raised her hand. "But what if you'd failed? What if you couldn't prove what he was doing?" Zoe laughed. "I couldn't fail because I knew the answer before he challenged me. I'd spent months studying that exact problem. When he gave me the chance to show what I knew, I was 100% ready. The best revenge isn't destroying someone who hurt you," Zoe concluded, her voice ringing through the room. "It's being so good at what you do that they realize they made the biggest mistake of their life by underestimating you." 2 years later, Zoe was studying computer engineering at MIT through a special program for gifted teens, while running her consulting firm remotely. Wilson, meanwhile, had tried repeatedly to land jobs at other auto companies, but the scandal followed him everywhere. The last anyone saw of him, he was begging for a second chance at a small shop on the outskirts, only to be turned away by an owner who recognized him from the news. Zoe proved that true revenge isn't sinking to your enemy's level, it's rising so high they become irrelevant. She turned an attempt at humiliation into the foundation of a career that changed not just her life, but an entire industry. The girl challenged to fix an impossible engine didn't just fix the engine, she fixed a corrupt system, created opportunities for hundreds of kids like her, and showed that the biggest mistake you can make is judging someone's potential by their appearance. If this story of grit and justice hit home, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Sometimes the world needs people like Zoe to remind us that real strength doesn't come from the power you hold, but from the smarts you use it with. Drop a comment. Have you ever underestimated someone who made you regret it? Your story might inspire others to never give up and prove their worth.